Okay, welcome back in. I'm going to continue this series until my battery dies or I find something else to do for the time being. Anyways, now I'm going to be taking a look at the Las Vegas Raiders. As you can see on their screen, they finished this past year with a 4-13 record, finishing fourth in the AFC West, finishing, I think, fifth in the NFL overall, and the fourth worst team in the AFC. So they only finished the worst in their division. At least they got that going for them. So this past year, as always, I'm going to skip through the preseason schedule because, again, preseason means nothing in my opinion. So they started their season off with a loss. Then they would win against the Ravens, lose against the Panthers, win against the Browns. They were 2-2 at that point in the season. And then after that, everything kind of fell apart. They would lose to the Broncos, Steelers, Chargers, Chiefs, Bengals before going on their bye week. So by the time week 10 rolled around, they were sitting at 2-7, 2-7 by their bye week. So by week 10, yes, they still had 7 more games to go or 8 more games to go, but it almost felt like once they got to their bye week that they were pretty much toast. And even after their bye week, they would go on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 game losing streak. So even with that weekend off, it still didn't help them. Didn't matter if players were banged up, what not rested, whatever it is. Just a very, very difficult and long season. They would finally stop their losing streak against the Jaguars. They would win in New Orleans, only to lose their home final game against the Chargers. So yeah, they won against the Saints, the Jaguars, the Browns, and the Ravens. So only one of those teams finished with an above 500 record, and really not a whole lot to be proud of. If I'm going to be honest with you, if you're a Raiders fan, we'll take a look at the player stats, and then I'll give my little review and stuff like that, as I always do. So the Raiders went through a couple of quarterbacks, just like a lot of teams do, especially when it comes to injuries. So Gardner Minshew was the starter at the beginning of the year before he got hurt. He would finish with 2,013 yards. He had 9 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, so not a very good touchdown to pick ratio. And his completion percentage would be 66.34. Now, O'Connell did replace him, but his stats weren't as good, or he just didn't have as many touchdowns or passing yards as Minshew did. So Brock Bowers had an amazing rookie season for a tight end. He would finish with 1,194 yards. So he almost clipped 1,200 yards receiving for a rookie tight end, which would have been amazing. I mean, he still had a good season regardless. He would finish with 112 catches. He had 5 touchdowns. Jacoby Myers, the wide receiver, would finish with 1,027 yards, 87 receptions, 4 touchdowns for him. Alexander Madison, the running back, would finish with 420 rushing yards on 132 attempts for 4 touchdowns. Amir Abdullah would finish with 311 rushing yards himself, 66 attempts, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Now we'll take a look at the defensive side of thing. Whenever I think of Raiders defense, Max Crosby is like the face of that defense. He would finish with 7.5 sacks and 28 total tackles. Robert Spillane, would finish with 91 tackles. He had 2 sacks and 2 interceptions. And Jack Jones, the cornerback, would finish with 3 interceptions. He had 52 tackles and 16 pass deflections. And on special teams, Daniel Carlson, the kicker, would finish with 34 field goals on 40 attempts. So he had 85% with his field goals. AJ Cole, the punter, would finish with 3,304 punting yards and 65 total punts on the season. So for the Raiders, let me see if I can just scroll back. Hope I'm not going to do something wrong. Team, there we go. Now I got their logo back on the screen. So for the Raiders, there's no question it was a very disappointing season. If I'm not mistaken, this was their second year without Derek Carr because he played his first year without Derek Carr because he played No, second year without Derek Carr. Okay. So they're still obviously looking for the new face of the franchise, the new quarterback of their future. Now, can that be Pat O'Connell? It sure can, but whether they decide to draft somebody else or like a lot of other decisions, maybe they try to trade for another quarterback, trade up in the class, or try free agency and bring somebody else in. They're clearly not scared to spend money. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think Gardner Minshew is coming back. Not because of how poorly he played, but because, well, that plays a bit of a factor. But obviously, he's injured now. And whenever players start to get hurt, it almost feels like their chances get fewer and far between in this league. And it might be the same with a lot of other leagues, whether it's hockey, football, baseball, basketball, you name it, that injuries can play a toll on a person's body, and it can also affect the outcome of where they play and how long they play, and if they even play at that. So for the Raiders, uh, they made the playoffs. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. They would lose in the first round to the Bengals, and they haven't really had a successful season since then. So to say that they're in like a retool, rebuild wouldn't really be that much of an understatement. I but the thing with the Raiders is that they could go like ice cold and then they could get red hot because leading up to their playoff game, which was 3 seasons ago now, prior to that, they were subpar. They weren't really that great. So they're hard to read. That's pretty much all I'm trying to get at was they could be piss poor for 2, 3 years, have an amazing season, and then go right back to being piss poor again. So they could have an amazing 2025-26 campaign. They could jump up the standings. They could prove a lot of people wrong. They could make the playoffs for all I know. But then it's the consistency that really is bothersome. And I'm not even a Raiders fan. I'm a Broncos fan, so I can't really uh, sound too empathetic about a team I'm really not too crazy about. But I mean, you can feel free to disagree if that's how you think. But just look at their history when it comes to their records and the playoffs. Recently, it hasn't been that great since like the second last time they made the playoffs was in 2016-17. Derek Carr got hurt at the end of that, and then the Raiders got bounced in the first round by the Texans, and again they got bounced in the first round by the Bengals in the 2021-22 campaign, and it's been 3 straight losing seasons since then. So I don't want to say they're retooling or rebuilding. I really don't know. I really have no idea what they're doing. Like they do have a lot of key pieces and a lot of good players. And like I said, their tight end had an amazing first year. If O'Connell can, stay healthy and be more consistent, maybe he is the quarterback moving forward, but I really wouldn't put my money on it. And then as for their defense, like when I think of defense and the Raiders, Max Crosby comes to mind, and you saw the season that he had, you saw the stats. It really wasn't that terrible, but because their offense wasn't great, then their defense suffers, and then obviously they go on to lose more games than they win. So, yeah, for the Raiders, if I had to make a crazy prediction for next year, which I know I still will do in the summertime, but I wouldn't be surprised if they finish fourth again in that year in that division. You got to think about the teams that are there. The Chiefs are always going to be number one. As long as Patrick Mahomes is on that team, they're always going to be dominant. And it kills me to say that inside because I can't stand the Chiefs, but they're going to be there. I think the Chargers are probably going to be back into the playoffs. They proved a lot of people that they belong there, but it's just can they get over that hump? Can they finally get a win under their belt when it comes to the postseason? And as for my Denver Broncos, I believe they should be just as good, if not a little bit better. So you're looking at possibly 3 teams in that division getting in the playoffs again next year. So, and you think about all the other teams in the AFC, whether it's AFC North, the AFC East, or the AFC South, that some other division could have 2 teams from that division get in. So I don't think I don't see the playoffs next year and the Raiders in my little crystal ball. I really don't see that happening. But again, if they do, that'd be fantastic for the fan base and for the team itself. And they could be dangerous to play against in the postseason. But again, because they've been so inconsistent and so piss poor, and it's hard to look at this team as something that's going to have a drastic overhaul and have a huge number of changes. Like next year, they could finish with 5 or 6 wins. They could finish with 4 wins again. I don't know. Like I said, this team just is so wishy washy. It's hard for me to pinpoint where they're sitting at and what they're trying to do, because they're good enough on defense. They're okay on offense. But if injuries plague them or they get too many turnovers, whether it's interceptions or fumbles, that just seems to be their Achilles heel, then it's looking like it could be another long season in the 2025-26 campaign. But again, prove me wrong, Raiders. You could have a fantastic year next year. You could knock us out of knock us down. I don't know. Like, I don't know. There's just so many questions when it comes to this team, and there's so many teams that are in the same boat where they're not good, but they should be. So again, where they stand, what they should be doing, I don't know. But I'll leave it in the hands of Mark Davis, and we'll kind of go from there. Anyways, yeah, that's going to take care of my review for the Las Vegas Raiders in the 2024-25 campaign. As always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative. Until next time, and as always, take care.